Home is behind the world ahead, and there are many paths to tread, through shadow to the edge of night, until the stars are all alight. An elven maid there was of old, a shining star by day. Her sunshine hair was burning gold, and her smile a glowing ray. Nimrodel was the maiden's name, and she was the fairest being to have ever walked this earth. Her skin snow white and as smooth as marble, and her eyes, those ocean deep eyes, held every single blue you could imagine, and one shade more. Yet, for all her beauty, Nimrodel was not loved, for just the sight of her would send some into a mad, childish joy that could not be controlled, and others into a stunned silence that would last for days, and it would send others sinking to their knees, weeping. For they knew they never again would see anyone or anything as fair. And so Nimrodel lived alone in the woods of Lorien, beside the waterfall and the pool beneath that bore her name. Yet there was one that could stand in her presence and keep some of his senses. King Amroth, Lord of Lorien Wood. And he would visit her as often as he could, but he couldn't live with her, and he couldn't marry her, because he had his kingly duties leading his realm and leading its people. And so he was forced to only visit her as often as he could. And Lorien knew a long time of peace, and the foul creatures that used to live on this world, the crooked, snarling goblins, and the great giant wolves that used to roam the lands, were banished by Amroth and his royal warriors into the dark caves and towering mountains. But there was one evil that began to seep onto the borders of Lorien. Ma, that brought destruction and fire and war. And Nimrodel could sense this evil coming in the wind, and she could feel it in the earth. And she longed to leave Lorien Wood, where she could live in safety. And one day, Amroth came to visit Nimrodel, and she told him her wishes. Then I shall leave my kingdom and go with you. We shall take a ship across the western seas and to the green, undying lands where our love can grow forever. And so they began their journey. And as they travelled, Amroth sang to Nimrodel. Home is behind the world ahead, and there are many paths to tread, through shadow to the edge of night, until the stars are all alight. There was one obstacle that separated Lorien from the western shore, and that was the dark, towering mountains where the goblins and the giant wolves lived. But their road had to go over the peaks. And they ascended up into the heights and into a narrow, dark ravine. and a bone-chilling, cold mist descended on them. And it wasn't long before they heard the telltale snarls and cackles of the goblins scurrying down from the cliffs, and the low growls of the wolves coming from behind them. So Amroth turned to Nimrodel. "Flee! I shall hold them off. Go to the shore and wait for me at the ship." And she looked once more into his eyes, turned and disappeared into the fog. And Amroth drew his silver sword, backed against the stone wall, and waited for his enemies to come. And it wasn't long before they were upon him. And he slashed, and he chopped, and one goblin would fall, and another goblin would fall. Ah! Ah! But still, another one would jump in his place, and he slashed again, and more, and a wolf would bound forward, and he would stab. And through the night he fought and fought, but still more and more came. And just when he thought he couldn't lift his sword any more, dawn broke. He cleaved the last goblin in two, and he had killed them all. So immediately he started to look for his love, Nimrodel. But he could find no trace of footsteps in the hills, and no sign of her down in the woodlands. And so he decided, I will go to the ship on the western coast and wait for her. And wait for her he did. Through the spring, through the summer, and autumn came, but still Nimrodel was nowhere to be seen. And then a great storm swept down from the north, and Amroth, waiting on the ship, was tossed out with his crew to sea. And in the night the mast was broken and the rudder shattered. And when he went up to the top deck in the morning, he saw the far distant shore many leagues away. And he thought he could hear Nimrodel's voice on the wind. "Nimrodel!" And from helm to sea, they saw him leap, like an arrow from a string, and into water diving deep, like dew upon the wind. The wind was in his flowing hair, and the foam around him shone. They saw him riding, strong and fair, going like a swan. And from the west there came no word, or from the hither shore. No tidings elven folk have heard of Amroth evermore. But can you hear Amroth's song? Home is behind, the world ahead, and there are many paths to tread, through shadow to the edge of night, until the stars are all alight. Mist and shadow, cloud